my high school calculus teacher, she would greet all of her students every day at the door. And one day she said to me, "You will be a CEO one day." I have always taken that to heart. When I started Wellness Extension, I texted her and I told her how much she inspired me.
6 words of encouragement and a desire to help others propelled Jillian Bernstein from an early career in finance into building better workplaces. Now the CEO of the Wellness Extension and a trusted partner to CEOs, her expertise is embedding and applying well-being. It's personal, not personnel. Jillian certainly walks the walk in this area. For more than a decade, she's been journaling every day and applying many of the same workplace techniques at home and vice versa. That's a home that also features her husband, who recently donated a kidney to help save someone's life. Jillian is an alumni of our academy, and we're very fortunate to have her as an instructor in our Navigating Difficult Conversations course. I'm Carl Tischler of the HPNA Academy, and this is the Better for Having Met Them podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Jillian is joining us from suburban Washington, D.C. Welcome.
Thank you, Carl. I'm honored to be here today.
We're delighted to have you. And Jillian is the real deal when it comes to corporate HR, building meaningful and compelling workplaces, bringing well-being into the workplace and into our practical lives. We met through a common membership of an HR group and a shared interest in, as I say, workplaces and helping others. She's a force multiplier and an inspiration, particularly to overworked and overwhelmed management teams. And she does this through her practice, the Wellness Extension, which we're looking forward to hearing about. She is definitely a resident expert in juggling things and outmaneuvering overwhelm. And Jillian, I thought we'd start that process of doing that by what we do in the Academy, which is stepping back and looking not just at origins, but looking at the evolution of career, where you started, where you've been, where you're heading over time. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you just kick off with that, if you can give us an overview of what that mural would look like.
So coming out of the university, I wanted to pursue a path that was pretty analytical and found myself in litigation consulting with a background of economics. And so I did that for 3 years and realized I was the person who was so excited when new people were hired and started with the company and I got to onboard them. And I was like, I'm really loving connecting with people. And a couple of job iterations later, when we had to move and then move back, I said, I think I'm ready for a career pivot about 4.5 years after graduation. And instead of the economics analytics, I decided, why not give my hand a new career in HR? And so I picked up an opportunity at a local real estate finance firm here in the Washington, D.C. suburban metro area. And from there, I started growing my HR generalist career. Within 6 months of me starting as an HR generalist, my boss left. He had a health issue. So we were a pretty small company at the time, about 80 employees. And the CEO said, do you just want to run HR? And I was deer in headlights a little bit, but I tapped into my resources and my network and learned the ropes of HR. I still leaned on my prior boss to help mentor me even after he left. And I grew into the VP of HR at that firm. I was there for 10 years. The firm grew tremendously, went public. And then I had an opportunity after having my second kiddo to move into a different sector, one that really pulled at my heartstrings in the world of public health. And I led and grew an HR team there for a little over 8 years before starting the Wellness Extension as an HR consulting firm and really a partner to small businesses. And that has been a dream of mine, really, since I was in high school, to be someone who was a female business founder and really put my skills into practice of connecting with people. So I'm passionate about people and helping them grow and enjoy where they spend a fair number of hours of their week. And going forward, I want to continue to support small businesses in this way, thinking about making sure that it is not personnel, but personal in the workplace. And you really need to get to know your people and treat them as human beings, not human doings. That's a huge part of my angle with HR. They plan to grow the wellness extension. And ultimately, I hope at retirement, I am enjoying kind of looking back on what I grew and enjoying time with my kids and our growing family and my husband and traveling. So that's what my kind of growth plan, growth goal looks like. But I made this pivot because myself, I wanted to see a little more balance in my life where I was not only growing an organization of my own to support many organizations, but also, I have two teenagers, Carl, and this is a pivotal time in their lives. So I want to make sure I can also be on the ground and present for them as well. So I try and practice what I preach, walk my own talk.
Amazing. Sounds like we're stepping back and looking at that mural. Sounds like there's 4 pivots maybe in there. The first one after the initial job, the second pivot with having that opportunity. Some people might refer to that as like a battlefield promotion. Yeah, there's an opportunity to do it. And as an aside, you have to be so grateful for people that give you that opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And then the pivot to public health, and then the pivot from that to the wellness extension. Which of those pivots did you find most challenging, looking back on them?
I think even pivoting there were 2. So one was pivoting to make the decision to leave corporate and start my own small business. And I did that not only for my family and to really give myself some more flexibility as my kids are growing, but also because I wanted to build my own organization, and I had this kind of bug to be able to help more people. So I think that was a big decision because I really enjoy the people I work with at both organizations where I've grown my HR careers, but I stayed at one for over 10 years and then one for over 8. And when I resigned, my boss said, "Can we be a client?" And I think that's a testament to the relationships you build. And so I felt so bad leaving them, but I ended up staying and continuing to work with them now in a new capacity as a client. So I feel so connected to them, which is wonderful. But I also think that one pivot when my boss left, and I was a little bit of a deer in headlights early on in my HR career. And I think that proved to be challenging for many reasons. Not only was I learning a new field and making sure my I's were dotted, my T's were crossed, HR is a lot of compliance elements too, in addition to all the people connecting. But I had a pretty traumatic event, losing my mom at the age of 27. She was 54. And that happens pretty early on in my HR transition in this organization. They were still small, as I mentioned at the time, but I think that was a big life pivot for me, and thinking about how do we manage when people are going through really difficult situations? How can a company be really supportive? Because I got some support, but not the support I would necessarily give employees these days, having been through that situation. So that was a really big personal pivot for me in how I looked at the type of leader I wanted to be going forward based on the experience I had after she passed away.
What does that type of leader look like?
So
what would characterize the leader?
Yeah, I speak a lot about empathetic leadership when I talk to managers, when I talk to the senior leadership team at organizations. And I think that is a critical skill that needs to be cultivated among leaders today. As an example, when someone passes away, as in the case of what I was managing through with my mom passing away, I went home, obviously, and I was there for her funeral and some after preparations and making sure my dad was set up okay before I came back to the DC area. And I got on a call, and my boss at the time said in a very unempathetic voice, "When are you going to be back?" And it was only a week. And I was like, we have a lot to do. And it was everything. My mom had handled finances and a lot within the house. And there was just a lot that needed to be done. And I didn't want to leave my dad to do it all by himself. So I thought his tone wasn't so great. It didn't make me want to go back. And I felt if he had just taken a moment of empathy and said, "Jillian, we cannot even imagine what you are going through. We can't imagine how difficult this must be. Your mom was so young, and we know your family has had a really trying year this past year. How can we help get you back in a reasonable way? What would that look like? How can I help you?" That still is about getting me back to work, but it has a much more supportive and empathetic undertone to it. And I think I wouldn't have shut down in that conversation. Now, fortunately, there was a very empathetic CFO, and I went back and we worked out a plan and it was fine. But I think what I took from that experience is with every organization with whom I work, I always encourage extended bereavement leave times. It is not a type of leave any employee ever wants to, for instance, have to use, but it's there, God forbid, when you need it. And I do think that the way that you approach employees when they're dealing with challenging life situations, whether it is a disability that someone might have in the workplace and they need a certain accommodation, or whether it is a loss of a loved one, anything that might be difficult, there is that empathetic leadership that needs to come into play, because at the end, it will build a lot of goodwill with your employees and result in longevity of employees in the long term, as well as retention and loyalty. And you'll see they'll give back to the organization tenfold because you are there to support them during their most difficult times. So I think that's what empathetic leadership looks like. I'm not saying that you need to be a bulldoze, like that employees should bulldoze their employers and take advantage of things. But I think it's a partnership with your people. And that's super critical in terms of well-being of the organization in general.
And can empathetic leadership be taught and supported with policy and action? Or is it just something that someone has or they don't have?
So I think it can be taught, but it needs to be nurtured and practiced. So I'll work a lot with organizations, leadership teams to say, why don't you try and say it this way and see what the response is that you'll get? So that's where I can come into play as a good sounding board for that. So while some people might not have it innately and might be like that CEO, when will you be back? There are ways that you can turn on that empathetic, what I would say, just that empathetic skill, and make sure that those antennas are up when it's a challenging or a difficult time for an employee. But I do think it has to be nurtured over time and practiced. In really difficult conversations, even in the workplace, when I've had to let employees go and I'm having a conversation with a manager on how the flow is going to go with that conversation, I sometimes help by typing out a script for them to even practice, read, put in their own words. So that way the empathy is still coming across in this difficult conversation, and you come to the conversation as someone the employee can lean on and feel supported by, as opposed to an axe coming down and being like, today's your last day. So we work a lot on tone and how you say things, but I definitely think it's something that can be nurtured, even if it's not innate.
I know it's hard to generalize, but if you were to generalize, would you say that managers that you work with, maybe also particularly first-time managers, are not really equipped or trained to be empathetic or to be active in the people skills like this?
I think it's a need across organizations. Look, I think there are always gems that might come to the table with these innate qualities. I'm a huge believer in the Strength Finders assessment. Empathy is in my top 5 strengths. So sometimes I think people are just naturally inclined to embrace an empathetic leadership model. But I think having reminders and teaching your people how to tackle certain situations that might arise in the workplace and how to prepare for those conversations is so critical. And I think that it isn't something that is apparent for new managers on day one. And they need to be having conversations with their HR team and or leadership development team within the organization so they can practice, because by practicing, you're not caught off guard, or when something does come down the road that's a little more of a stumbling block, you know how to appropriately get over that block and make sure that it's a positive outcome in the end.
And when you are going in and advising companies about building, nurturing, empathetic, high-performing workplaces, do you have recommendations about training for things like this so that it's not just training like reactively by crisis, but preparation? What's your sort of thought about how you approach that?
Yeah, one of the great ones is what we've put together and partnered with on, which is the navigating difficult conversations and how you do that. And the Mind Bloom AI is a great way to practice those difficult conversations. But I think if your organization offers trainings, then it is so much better to do it live with people and have sounding boards on how to approach various situations, which is something we do in our course, which I love. And I think if organizations can engage even outside, what I have found, even when I was in-house in HR, is when you engage organizations outside to come in and do some of these trainings, it's actually more beneficial, because I found sometimes employees look at HR as like the talking head, and they've heard the message so many times that it's nice to get someone from an outside training organization to facilitate that conversation, that discussion, and see it from a new lens or a new angle. So that is something I highly recommend to teams, is if you can put aside a bit of a budget, because I think critical conversations are really what can make or break an employee staying or going with an organization. And we know, Carl, that it costs a lot more to find somebody if somebody leaves, and recruitment costs are high. It's high costs on managers' time for interviewing and the HR team on finding candidates, but retaining people by providing them training and more skills and being able to help upskill them and coaching them is not only are you demonstrating to the employees and managers that you're investing in them, right? But you're also, for the organization itself, saving a lot more than having to go find someone new, building trust, building relationships, and ultimately getting them up to speed on whatever function they are supporting you within that organization. So when you look at the two, even from a bottom line perspective, it is so much better to bring people in and help coach on those skills that you know are so critical for managers and leaders to have.
I think it's also such an interesting thing that you and I both come from a finance background first. And as you were just talking about and explaining the MOI or the ROI of investing, what do you feel is most effective in convincing management teams or boards of the need to put these things in place? And do you feel that there's pushback against things that are labeled well-being or empathetic because there's a view that they're somehow low performing?
So sadly, I think sometimes well-being programming, training, and development does fall to the bottom of the pile for organizations. They are really focused, obviously, on analytics, benefits, payroll, things like that. But I do think anecdotal stories and giving training, development, infusing and investing in your people through coaching programs and offering practical and tactical takeaways to your people can really move the needle when you look at retention numbers. So the number one employee reason after sometimes financial that employees leave organizations is their manager. So if we're not training the people who are working day to day with employees to engage with them, connect with them, build relationships, and therefore trust with them, then we're missing a big part of retention. And I think that is something that is often overlooked by board because it gets brushed under words and management because it can get brushed under the rug as soft skills. People should just have these when they're walking in the door. But we need to nurture that just as much as we need to nurture a new developer coming on to learn a language, to develop code on a certain platform. It is something, as I mentioned with the empathetic leadership a few minutes ago, that we have to continually try to foster and being supportive from the top and telling our managers, we believe in this, we want you to practice this, because when that one conversation comes, we might not have to have a difficult conversation every day, but when it comes, you'll have the tools in your toolkit to manage it. And that could save the organization, to be honest with you, thousands. It could save you thousands in potential lawsuits that could come down the pike, or it could save you thousands in recruiting because somebody leaves and you need to backfill a really critical position.
I think one of those things that is so interesting that you're talking about is, again, that marriage of high performance and empathetic. And as you talked about before, when you've got to have a difficult conversation to let someone go, I guess the basis is you feel like that's a hard conversation. So in a hard situation, therefore we've got to be tough. But could you just walk us through your approach when you've got to have a difficult conversation with someone about leaving a company, about how you do that in a way that is both empathetic and high performing, to put it that way?
Yeah, sure. So those are, even with 20 years plus of experience in this field, I still am a little bit like butterfly in my stomach up at night because you never know what the reaction is going to be from the employee or the individual on the other side of this conversation. So I think a big part of having them is preparing and being mindful of any outcomes emotionally, whether I've had conversations where it's been over Zoom and someone's hung up immediately. And I've had conversations where we've gotten the exact opposite extreme and the person has just been incredibly grateful for their experience at the organization. And no matter which way it goes, I always approach it with empathy. And the way I typically encourage managers and have had these conversations myself is to say straight out of the gate, address what happened. We have to have a difficult conversation today. Example, what is going on right now with the economy or the administration? We've lost some business. So unfortunately, we don't have additional work for you. Today is going to be your last day, but I want to support you and help you in the transition. And so I think by adding that little bit, support and help you in this transition is a critical way for people to let you know, or for people to hear that you are there for them immediately. And it's also, you're ripping off the Band-Aid right away. You're not dancing around. I have to have a difficult conversation. This is really hard for me. It's not about you when you're delivering sad news, challenging news, or something that the other person on the other end is not going to want to hear. It really is not about the deliverer. So you need to keep that in mind. I tell managers all the time, don't say, I'm so sorry to have to do this. You do have to do it. And it's, again, not about you. It's about supporting them. So that's the angle. And that's the lens you need to go in when you're having a conversation, for instance, about layoffs. I think there are other elements that I always advise, and we get into this in our course, about how you address things if it is not letting someone go, but how you can really put on the hat of a coach and think about how you're delivering feedback to elevate them and to get them to a place where they will improve and do better and further augment and advance their skill set, because you want them to succeed. And I think if managers start to think about difficult conversations and having those kinds of conversations around that coaching lens, that it makes it a lot easier as the deliverer of whatever the news is. But in the specific question around layoffs, I think it is important to be very upfront, very quickly with the employee, and then be supportive immediately after. For instance, I always offer my support for resume reviews, LinkedIn contacts. Email me if you want to talk. I know this is a lot of information to take in. I often say, email me. We can set up time separately to talk once you've had time to digest this, because people often feel like a gut punch. And it does. It's emotional. It all is emotional. So you want to make sure you're there for them, not just in that moment, but afterwards too.
Right. And Jillian, in your current practice, if you get called into an organization that's got real challenges around, for instance, a lack of empathy or high turnover, these things, what's your sort of approach when you come in to auditing the situation and looking at it and helping assess it? And what's that process like of playing that back to managers and boards in terms of telling them what the problems really are?
Yeah. So I think it's one, taking a minute to get to know people, right? Sitting down one-on-one, understanding what people enjoy about their roles and also what they don't. Because sometimes we're trying to fit square pegs into round holes. And that's where the kind of headbutting starts, whether it's with individuals collaborating within an organization or whether it's someone who's not performing because they are put in a role to develop sales and bring in business, and that is not their straight. So I like to sit down. I like to get to know people. I like to know what makes them tick. I try to find also a way to connect with them. So whether it's them doing an assessment like the Strengths Finder assessment or connecting with them or something more social, non-work related. For instance, like one of my former colleagues was really into Peloton. You mentioned I love Peloton. So I know that when I connect with that individual, that's a really good topic for us to talk about before I dive into anything where I'm like, so what do you think about this? Can we think about the angle we might want to take on this? And I generally use the word we so I can be very supportive. And I think that's really critical for the most executive leaders to do with their senior leadership team is come across as how can we tackle this situation? So the senior leader who might need refinement in some skills or a manager who might need refinement understands they have someone supporting them in their corner. And I'm going to help you best I can get there. Look, sometimes it's just not a good match. And we're going to be honest about that too. But I think it's important to build relationships, build trust, and also assess strengths and make sure those strengths are aligned with the roles and responsibilities the individual is supposed to be doing in their day-to-day function.
Jillian, what tends to be the trigger or the catalyst for a company to be bringing you in and working with the wellness extension?
So I think it's generally when they have a people problem. Sometimes I work with clients who are just getting started and it's just overwhelming in terms of, for instance, one of my clients has had to implement a new HR information system. So that's everything from benefits, payroll, performance. And I have this background in analytics and I love it. So I can figure out the ins and outs of a system. And it's great to get in on the ground when people want to make sure their hiring, onboarding, and performance processes are in place and even systematized, that's some of my favorite work to do. But I tend to also really be on call when managers I have a crisis and I don't know how to handle this. How do I handle it? My goal is to connect with small business owners and leadership teams before that becomes an issue. So that way you can really make sure that your people problems stay at bay, because that is not what the organization typically is built to do, is manage people problems. They're meant to do whatever their mission is. And I think that is the miss with human resources, people culture, people ops, called a variety of things these days, is that they don't engage HR soon enough. And if you do that, you can really help dissipate any people problems that are maybe starting to sizzle at the bottom and prevent them from bubbling up. I really love getting in on the ground floor, helping build community and connection with employees early on, whether it's through philanthropic work that the organization does together, whether it's focusing on well-being programming, or even whether it's just coffee connects with your people or checking in on them. I have one client where I make sure I'm on tap to send the birthday reminders. So everybody gets a gift on their birthday, and we make sure that everybody is recognized at least on their special day throughout the year. And then that organization also likes to bring their employees together because they're all remote for a summit every year just to connect and in person. They connect weekly, but it's really a beautiful thing. And I think when you do that, again, you build camaraderie, you build community, you build connection, and the people problems tend to stay at bay. So I think that is the time to bring in HR. Once you have 5 or so employees, you need to start thinking about how am I keeping these people? They're like my go-tos. They're making this business run. How can I invest in them and make them feel connected to as a team?
Jillian, do you feel that the challenges of a company with a remote configuration are fundamentally different than those that are hybrid or in person, or are there commonalities across both?
So I think there are commonalities. Having worked for middle of the pandemic when I was in corporate still, I moved a company that was hybrid. So we had already given employees 2 to 3 days a week to work from home to be fully remote. And I think you lose a little bit of the stop bys, right? Oh, stopping by your office just to say hello, or hey, I wanted to bounce something off of you because now you need to message them in Slack or in Teams or have a call about something. If there's definitely like a Zoom fatigue and things like that with remote. But I think the premise of what organizations need to do is the same. And I think if you're not building community when you have your people in the office, and you're not building community when you have your people all over the world, the country, then it's just a problem to begin with. Do I think it's easier in one way or another? No, I think there needs to be an effort for both. So whether it is consistently having team meetings where everybody turns their camera on, and it's a cameras on meeting once a week, but we understand people don't want to be staring at themselves all the time. So we also have camera off meetings, which is fine too. That is a philosophy that an organization that's fully remote can have. If it is hybrid or in person, what day that week are you bringing in bagels or lunch or taking like I have one client where I still work very closely with their HR team, and I've scheduled an HR meeting, but we're going on a walk together and we'll do a walking meeting. Like, how are you connecting with your people in person to make sure it's a meaningful moment, and there's also some water cooler talk happening. And I think even when you have hybrid meetings or Zoom meetings, whatever it might be when people are remote, it's important for employees and managers to connect about the weekend, to make sure you're not just diving into whatever the topic of that meeting is right off the bat. How are you? How was your weekend? I know your birthday's coming up. Do you have any plans? Whatever it might be, that personal touch makes a big difference for relationship building within an organization.
Where does the name The Wellness Extension come from?
So when I was thinking about how I wanted to be a consultant to teams, I knew I wanted to focus on well-being at work. And I knew well-being at work isn't necessarily just, oh, let's do a yoga class together. That could be part of it as part of building connection. But I wanted to be an extension of the leadership team. I wanted to be an extension of HR teams that are strapped and have a million things on their plates because we're always putting out fires. So I knew I wanted to use the word extension. And I knew I really believed in well-being at work and thinking about the employee, again, as a human being, not a human doing. So putting those two things together, thinking about how we can help, is really what kind of set off that whole idea of well-being at work. And for me, it was making sure companies know well-being of their employees is important because it affects the well-being of the organization. And I think that the name conveys the second slogan being, it's not personnel, it's personal. And I think that having that component of making sure the HR component is personal, it's not the principal's office, it's not just administrative paper pushing, but it's really to be your people connector. And that's why I love it.
It's like the human in human resources.
Exactly.
So when we talk about well-being, I know you have a lot of focus on practicalities and bringing well-being into the workplace in very specific, concrete ways rather than just conceptually. What are some of those ways and either things you do?
Yeah, there are a few. One of my favorites is making sure you're infusing micro gratitude moments into the workday. And examples of this could be leaving a post-it note if you're in the office on someone's computer monitor, just saying, you did a great job on that presentation today. Thank you so much. And even that personalized handwritten note will give someone a lift that day. Or asking your team members, I happen to love chai tea. I know what my team members like. And isn't it nice when that appears on your desk, either in the morning or midday coffee break or whatever it might be? Small, meaningful moments where you're acknowledging and recognizing contributions of your team. But you should also make sure you ask your team members the type of recognition they like when it comes to showing gratitude. Some people don't like to be awarded or lauded in a setting with others, but they really appreciate the private recognition. So it might just be sending a note to them, where others love when the balloons are falling or receiving kind of recognition in a larger audience. And it's important to know that too. So when you're on a team call, you can say, hey, I just want to do a shout out to Joey Smith. Joey did a great job presenting on this last week to the entire organization. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge him. So that's an example. Again, it costs nothing, but it is so important for your people to feel seen. So I like infusing some of those into the workplace. Candidly, I do them in the house, like for my kids and my husband. I'll leave notes on like the mirrors in the bathroom, and you can bring that into your life because I think gratitude is so important. I think other practical things that organizations can do when it comes to their benefits or policies are things like we've talked about throughout our conversation so far, bereavement leave. I think at least if it's immediate family members, at least a week, 2 weeks is a very reasonable policy to have paid bereavement leave for leave that someone hopes to never use. But when you need to, it's there. I also think a policy around, since so many organizations are hybrid and still some are remote, around emailing hours and making sure you're having a turn on and turn off timing for when emails are being sent. Delay delivery is a fantastic feature that we should be using more regularly. And as managers, we really should be modeling that behavior. So if we don't want our employees on after 6:30, don't email them after 6:30. If you want to get the email out so it's off your head as a manager, send it delay delivery for the next morning. So those are simple things that you can do. I've implemented no internal meetings at different organizations just to give people time to do deep work and have their time to think. Sometimes at Cal Newport's one of my favorite authors to read, and he talks about all the task switching that we do on a day-to-day basis and the pull of email and, oh my gosh, the immediate need to respond. Give people a moment to have blocks of time where they can get the work done, not have to run from meeting to meeting. So those are just some practical things that benefits, programs, policies, moments in the day that managers can implement.
Those are fantastic. And again, I think of them as you're describing into two categories: things at the policy level, company wide, and it sounds like things that best practices for managers to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I view as an absolute black belt, not just in empathy.
Ah,
We talked about 11 years of journaling, and you're a natural on post-it notes and on micro gratitude.
thank
We
you.
talk about things at the manager level where it's not a person's nature to do that, and where people are busy and doing it. What are some ways of embedding that and helping managers embed these prompts to do these things? What kind of works and moves the needle for people in doing that?
So I think you need to, I know this sounds rudimentary, but like sometimes even just the reminders to do it are good. So even if you put a reminder on your calendar in the morning that pops up and says, send one gratitude note today, and maybe you have that happen every Tuesday and Thursday on your calendar. It's an easy way for that trigger to be like, oh, I got to send a note to maybe let so-and-so know they're appreciated. And I really want to make sure I reflect on that this week. So think let's use the tools that we have electronically to remind us to start making that a habit, and then it'll become more natural. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think managers, when they hopefully are setting agendas for meetings, they could do round robins and or let their teams know, hey, today we want to make sure that we're recognizing individuals on the team. So I want everybody, this is something that came out of that book that we both read by Michal Ashman, The Compliments Game. I want everybody to think about a compliment for a team member, and we're going to share those as part of our round robin. And I think those are really, again, simple lists. Include them in your agendas. It doesn't have to be every week when you meet, but maybe you make it once a month. And it's a fun way for the team to make sure they have those shout out moments. So use technology and then make it a habit and for reminding yourself to make sure these gratitude moments are adhered to. And then now Outlook, I know, does this automatically. And I'm not sure if Google does it too, but they say, hey, are you sending this email outside of work hours? Are you sure you don't want to delay send it? Right. So hopefully some of these email platforms are also AI reminding us that we need to hold back and make sure that we're also role modeling the policies that we want. The other thing that I think is really important, and it comes back full circle with empathetic leadership, is for managers to start thinking about how they can be vulnerable and share stories of their own to make sure that their team members feel like they're approachable. And I think vulnerability in the workplace is sometimes like poo-pooed, but it isn't something that we should be. I'm not saying make your life an open book at work. I am saying a story or share something that you think could resonate with someone who might be going through a difficult time on your team. I had an employee once who also lost a parent, and she happened to be 27 when she lost her mother. And I reached out to her and I said, do you want to grab lunch? Like, I drove out to see her in Maryland and we had lunch together, and I just sat there and we talked, and it was wonderful because she felt that there was, wow, someone else who connected with her. And I know when I lost my mom, none of my friends had lost their parents, thank goodness, at that time. And I felt somewhat alone. But then a colleague of my dad's had reached out to me, and she told me that she had lost her mom at a young age. It helped me to have that person to talk to. So I wanted to make sure that I could pay that forward if there was ever someone who needed it in the future. And there was someone when I was in corporate that happened to, and I wanted to help her. And we stayed connected ever since. And I think expressing that vulnerability and making sure as a manager that you're there for your team members and letting them know that, it also produces psychological safety in the workplace, which we talk often in HR about, and people don't necessarily think about it the right way, but it is important to have that approachability.
Do you think that AI like that is going to help make workplaces more human or less or more artificial?
So I think AI can be very beneficial to functionally getting our jobs done efficiently. I don't think it replaces the human touch. So I do think AI can learn tone a little bit, but delivering the message is still going to have to come from you. So even if you use AI to help craft, what should I say? I have to let someone go. And this is how I normally speak. Write me up something, whatever you might put into chat, Claude, whatever it might be. You're the one delivering the message. I don't think that sending email saying your job's been eliminated is a very empathetic thing to do, period. The human element will never go away. And while AI is amazing, I think what it's showing me is that things that we've learned without any of the tech, good eye contact, reading the room, all of that is so important when you're conversing with people and making them feel seen and heard and not just a cog in a wheel. And I think at the end of the day, the people who are seen, heard, valued are what's going to make one company successful versus having, frankly, turnover of cogs in the wheel because they didn't feel like they were connected to their organization. So the human element, for successful organizations, will not go away.
Mm-hmm. And Jillian, when you are recommending a strategy or an investment to a company that's about building empathy into the workplace, mm-hmm. how do you calculate and approach return on investment and justifying investment to non-HR people in management?
So some of it is anecdotal, like interviewing people to see what they might want and then making sure we implement a program that fulfills those needs and then assessing it afterwards and making sure that over time we see the results, whether it is through improved performance. And that could mean, wow, we made these couple shifts and now we've seen sales go up, or we've seen these wins on the client front. Or it could mean that so-and-so's behavior has changed so much and now they're collaborating so well. We're seeing great synergy on this team and not so many calls to HR anymore, which is amazing. So I do think some of it is, quote, can be subjective, but some of it can be bottom line, especially if it's synergy among individuals that's affecting the bottom line. And I think making sure that these programs are also tackling retention and turnover numbers. So the programs are tackling areas that would result in either turnover or, conversely, what we would hope is retaining our people for a longer period of time and looking at those quantitative numbers. Like, what does turnover and tenure look like? And looking at both of those. And also, one thing I love to do is stay interviews and talk to people who have been at the organization for long periods of time and find out what keeps them there and then do more of that. So I think that's a strategy that if you see somebody who's been with an organization for 10, 15 years, what's keeping you here? And how can we keep doing that? Because that's something, right? Because in talking to those performers who are there 10 to 15 years and are strong performers, I'm not saying people who maybe are just there to get a paycheck and then doing the bare minimum. Talk to those people, find out what would make them leave. That's a great question to ask your people. If you have those conversations, that can be illuminating in terms of the data points, both qualitative and quantitative, in terms of an ROI.
Is it possible to have an organization that is empathetic and focuses on well-being, where the CEO and management team are not themselves, I'm not saying they're toxic, but that's not perhaps a priority or a primary trait of theirs? Or does it always have to flow of? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you need an ambassador for it. It doesn't have to be the CEO or CFO. I've built programs where employees feel incredibly connected, but we've had really robust leaders throughout the organization play into whatever the program around well-being is and incorporate. Having been the leader of HR teams, I can often wear that hat, that baton, that banner. So if you don't have a strong people person in that seat, it can be challenging if anyone to do it. I don't think it has to come from the top. I think it's amazing when it does.
And is there a scorecard or a measure that you have for measuring the well-being of an organization or a division of an organization?
So I think taking these pulse surveys that I have like around well-being at work, safety, psychological safety at work, and thinking about approachability of your manager, getting kind of quantitative data on how people feel is a great way to pulse check. And that's literally what it is. I think about things like a 5-question survey and really making people choose 1 through 4. There's no 3 neutral, like in how you feel. And that is a good quick check for an organization. But I think if you're getting qualitative data, you have to sit down and have those conversations and those stay interviews. I also think exit interviews and discussions are really critical for organizations to have, not only to understand what caused the individual to apply for something else and leave, but where are they going and what is that organization doing that you can maybe learn from? And how can we, because I'm a huge learner, and how can we improve? What is our competition doing? Being mindful of that too is critical.
Got it. So we talked about habits and embedded practices before, and also your All Academy record for journalism. How have you been able to keep an 11-year streak going of journaling?
I make it easy. And I think that's every habit has to be easy. So my journal, so I used to journal as a kid all the time. So I liked it because it gave me time at night to decompress and get my thoughts out. But as a busy mom of 2, a wife, I'm very involved in my community, and I work, I made it easy at night. And I bought Gretchen Rubin's Happiness Journal, which is literally a one-liner journal to reflect on your day. Now, I often write more than one or 2 sentences, but it's fun because it's a 5-year journal. And for me, I get to always reflect on the previous year. You read what you wrote the previous year when you're about to write your one-liner for the night. So I actually really look forward to it and have just started weaving over 11 years ago. I just actually started my 12th year this week. Yeah, thanks. And I read, my husband and I, right before bed, I said to him, guess what last year was? And because I happened to see the same person on the same date a year later, which I thought was really funny. And it just goes to show like certain events come around similar times every year. And that has kept me going because it's fun for me personally to see, wow, look at where I was, where I've grown, both with wellness extension as a mother. Look at how my kids have grown, and look at my relationship with my husband, how that's changed over time, and what we've done, what experiences and adventures. And I think like it's cataloging your life. And when you have a habit, whatever it might be, that starts being fun over time, I would say just stick with it. I usually tell my clients when I run well-being challenges, it takes 3 weeks to build a habit. And I think if you do it and start to see the cool kind of the benefits of it. And for me, it's that moment before bed where I could have had the worst day, but I'm reflecting on something I'm grateful for, something I'm happy about. It just shifts the mindset. And so that's why I've kept it going, is because for me, from a mental health perspective, it's been amazing. And I'm very open and vulnerable about that. And I think that's helped me over the last 11 plus now 12 years. But even as a kid, it was something that I picked up, and I think someone gave me a journal as a gift. And so I just started then. But that's the journaling. I think you can do that with anything now, like working out, eating right, or like eating more nutritionally, mindfulness. I love meditating as well. I listen to a meditation every night before bed and in the morning when I wake up. And I'm not like sitting there saying on a pillow, but it helps reset me. And it's almost now become, I don't want to not do it because it sets my day off on the right foot or it calms my mind before bed. So those are like me personally, but it does take a lot of accountability too. It's great to have an accountability partner if you want to do this with someone just to get the habit going. The journaling, since I did it since I was a kid, I almost felt like I was like compelled to continue doing it. It's like a good track record. I like a little bit of seeing that on my own.
And Jillian, we met earlier in 2024. You joined us in the cohort of the CEO Self-Course that started in November 24. What brought you to the Academy? What attracted you to it?
I loved our conversation and I was really intrigued to learn a little bit more about how, especially now as a small business owner, how I could kind of manage the voices that could maybe be like, oh, am I going to do this? Or any type of self-doubt. This is very normal. And I felt like it was a great way for me to not only have accountability, but I'm generally a really positive person. And I wanted to make sure I maintained that positivity and took away lessons now that I was CEO of my own organization that were really there to support me. I think I do a lot of what I do in the world of HR as a wife, as a mother, like to support others. And I needed to think about how I could support myself in the business and putting on that hat. I love our accountability done group, making sure we're checking in on a weekly basis. I think that's phenomenal. And I love the individuals I met through the group. But really, our conversation sparked in me also the name. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on here, but like I do really love that the people who have come to this are genuinely good people. And I've been fascinated learning about everyone's backgrounds and cheering them on their journeys too. So for me, it's about connecting with good people and also keeping myself accountable. One of my big takeaways from our sessions that I think I sometimes struggle with is I will sit on something and not push it out. And you had a session, Carl, where you taught us about good as government. And I think sometimes I hold back. And in fact, I tried to launch a program and I didn't because I was like, it's not how I want it to be. And now I'm launching a different program for small business owners. And I was like, I think it's good enough. It's good. It's good to go out. Like I didn't perseverate too much before I sent something out, like a survey. And I've gotten great response. So sometimes I think we hold ourselves back. And the CEO of Self-Course helped me push myself forward.
Perfect. Yeah, it's always that challenge of like with business, you're working in the business and you don't get a chance to work on the business. You step back. That perspective is very challenging for you.
That's a good question. I'm still perfecting it, but I have found from a practical standpoint, I've done a lot of time blocking. Days where I have client meetings, maybe all day, a day with no meetings if I can avoid it. And then I pretty much have a couple days where I'll do either morning or afternoon meetings and give myself those deep work blocks. So time blocking has helped so I can manage what I think is a reasonable schedule. So that's the practical. The mindset shift from kind of an 8:30 to 5:30 grind versus what does fractional look like? Because it's also based on client need and urgencies and things like that has been a little more challenging in terms of making sure I'm also putting boundaries up for my own self-care and remembering that I need to be there not only for my clients, but I need to be there for my kids, for my husband, for myself. So how I've also worked that in is making sure that I don't back to back myself every day, that I allow there to be some buffer zones in my schedule so I don't get burnt out. I think you can get burnout on either end of the spectrum, whether you're in corporate or whether you're fractional. And I think it's really important to make sure you have those buffer zones. I do think that having a group and a group mentorship has helped with feeling connected. Sometimes at corporate, you're seeing people all the time, but having a group that I can use as a sounding board or just have connect with once a week or every other week has been really helpful in the fractional journey, because I think sometimes people can be lonely. I straddle an introvert extrovert, so I don't mind the introvert time to myself. But I do think that the group setting is very helpful.
Shifting over to going back to that mural that we started by looking at, origin stories, then and looking forward. What advice would you have for your younger self?
Let things roll off your back. And I think I worked with some individuals who, in my first kind of HR role, were rather gruff in personalities. And one of my former bosses had said, make sure you kill with kindness. So I did, but I often had trouble, like it would perseverate if they said something unkind or were gruff. And I would tell my younger self, just let it roll off your back. Like, you take the high road, you kill with kindness, and it'll all be okay.
So gruff people aside for the moment, that's a really memorable examples of people that were there for you at a key moment. You mentioned the CFO of that company you worked for when your mother passed. Were there other people on your journey that have particularly inspired you?
So my high school calculus teacher, Miss Tuckner, she was amazing. She would greet all of her students every day at the door and address you as Mr. or Ms. And one day she said to me, as I was walking into the classroom, Ms. Gross, that's my name, you will be a CEO one day. And I was like, wow, this like amazing woman in the math science field, like she's saying I'm going to be a CEO one day. Well, I have always taken that to heart. I even, when I was interviewing for college, right out of college, I got a job at an investment bank that I ended up turning down. But I used that line in my interview. And when I started Wellness Extension, it was like March here is like Women's International Month and International Women's Month. And I was about to LLC Wellness Extension. And my dad, who also was in the educational field before he retired, was able to get me her cell phone number from some contacts. And I texted her and I told her how much she inspired me and what I was about to do. And I got the most lovely text back from her. And anyway, we went back and forth a few times, but I thought it was so important for her to know as a teacher and my senior year in high school, how she inspired me and where I was today. And it was just those 5 words. So it's pretty cool.
Beautiful. What a beautiful story.
Thanks.
So to throw a little impromptu twist in here as we go, you can feel free to say no to this, Jillian, but I've done a lot of question asking of you. Are there any questions you have of me or of us while we're here?
Carl, what has been, you're growing the HPNA Academy. What's been your biggest challenge and what has also been your biggest reward?
You and the other students have definitely been the biggest reward, period. Exclamation point, end of story. That's easy. Without any question, focusing on that group of people, let's keep the G-rated version and just say HPNAs. That's been the best thing for me, is just the opportunity to work with exceptional people is great. That's the greatest reward, period. I think the greatest challenge of things stems out of some of the things we were talking about before that come from working in the people field. am working in doing it, which is how do you articulate and quantify what you do and why it matters. And I think in some ways it's a lot easier to build a workplace bit by bit as you go. And as you were talking about, through policy, through practice, as you go, it's a lot easier to actually do that than it is to describe how you do it. I think there's a lot of that are just experiential about it. And I think an area of feedback from students, we're together with people for a year on it, is I find myself saying a lot at the beginning, you have to take my word for it, right? This is something to be done and experienced out of it. And luckily, knock on wood, people have had, and I hope you would feel the same, have had really good experiences out of it. But being able to bottle that and articulate it to students, or certainly on a B2B basis, that's probably, I think, the biggest challenge, but it's gotten easier as we go.
Awesome.
So, that's how I would answer that. Thank you for that question.
Okay.
Jillian, what is the best piece of advice that you've gotten that comes to mind?
I think the best piece of advice that I've received was when I was looking at various schools to decide where to go to college. And my dad told me, he goes, go with your gut. And I think there is a gut brain connection, but that has carried me throughout life in the various decision points that I've made. Whether it's career-based, whether it was starting the wellness extension, whether it is choices, like even connecting with my husband and getting married, all of that, the gut feeling when you're in a variety of different situations, that advice has really helped me pursue so many paths and dreams.
It sounds like you've really been blessed to cross paths with really, truly exceptional people. Your father, your mother, of course, Mrs. Tuffner, amazing story. And I know you have an exceptional household, as I know it, and I know you are married to an exceptional person. And you wouldn't mind just sharing the story of your husband and an organ donation. It's so inspiring.
As Carl, my husband donated his kidney in February of this year, and it was a decision that we made together, and we thought long and hard about it. There was a woman who was connected to families at our synagogue who needed a new kidney, and she was young. She has a toddler right now. He's under 2. And her story pulled at our heartstrings. And my husband said, I think I want to get tested. And I said, you absolutely should. This would be amazing. It could support her. And he went through all the testing and connected with this organization called Dove. The recipient, her husband, is in the military, and Dove helps support military members and their families in making matches for organ donations, and specifically for them, kidney donations. And so my husband and her were the 54th pairing for Dove, and they successfully did the transplant back in February after finding out that he was a match. This is a local family, so we've had the opportunity to now connect with them so many times socially, and we feel like they're part of our family now, which is incredibly special. In fact, I just had dinner with the recipient last week. And is such a gift, obviously, to when you can donate a kidney to help someone and save someone's life. But I can't express the gift it has also been in return to our family. What my husband did, how he has modeled the selflessness for someone to help someone else, has been incredible for our kids. It has now connected us with a whole new community that we feel passionate to support. And before this, we were both organ donors on our driver's license, but this takes it to a whole new level when you're a living donor. And now my husband went through his training last week and is also a volunteer with Dove. So it really has come full circle. He wants to speak about living organ donation. And I think this is just an incredible story of two families that are now connected because of an act of selflessness on his part. So I'm grateful for what he did. I know the other family is as well. And I think it's just demonstrated in a world that sometimes you can't believe all that's going on, the goodness and leaning into the goodness in the world. And that's what it's brought to us. And to be able to show our kids how important it is to not only donate money and time, but how this was really pivotal to help change someone's life.
And how do people learn more about Dove? How do you find them on the internet?
So to find Dove, you go to dovetransplant.org and you can find out more information on what it means to be a living kidney donor for veterans if you wanted to get on that particular list. There's also an organization called Infinite Legacy, and I think that's a great way to also, I think my husband's volunteering with them as well. So those both organizations are incredible. We went for Dove, but Infinite Legacy is also another great organization to get involved with.
Jillian, it's been fantastic to learn about you, your approach, about the wellness extension, and about what you do for CEOs and organizations. When should CEOs reach out to you, and how do they contact you?
Thanks so much again for having me, Pearl. I think CEOs need to reach out before fires start within their organization. Think of having someone like me on call as an insurance policy to prevent fire from even erupting. And you really want to think about, as a leader of an organization, what are the small practical steps you can take now to help prevent bigger people issues from looming in the future. And by laying that groundwork with someone in the HR space and putting those kind of pieces down that are, again, very small, tactical takeaways over time, it'll really move the needle in building loyalty and retention of your people. And that ultimately will help your bottom line. So this reaching out and getting someone in on the, I would love to work with any organization on the HR people piece. I think it's just as critical as when you think about putting payroll in place or anything else for your business as a building block. Then something I just personally love, and we've talked about this, I've stayed with one organization in HR for over 10 years, another one for over 8, and then they've become a client that I work with now. I don't love to leave people. I love to connect and to stay with people. So that connection that I look for with my clients is that I want to work with you for the long term. I want to be your sounding board. I want to be that person to help put those building blocks in place for your people. I want to help be that people insurance for you. And the sooner we can partner together to do that, I think the less headaches any CEO will have. And they won't be calling when there is a fire, because we'll proactively make sure that we have programs, policies, and benefits in place to support the well-being, ultimately, of your people and your organization. So I would love to connect with any leadership team as an extension of them or small business owner. I have a variety of ways people can reach me, of course, on LinkedIn. They can email me at jillian@wellnessextension.com or visit my website, wellness-extension.com. And I also post a lot on Instagram at wellness_extension. So I am starting a program for small business owners. That's another great way to see how we could potentially work together. If you wanted to join that, it's a very small program. I'm only opening 4 to 5 slots for small business owners because I want it to be intimate in the sense that we'll make sure we're tackling and have time to tackle your HR issues a couple times a month. We'll gather, and you'll also have the opportunity to work with me one-on-one if you would like. But that's a great way for small business owners to learn from each other and also have me there to help support them in their various HR challenges, their people piece problems, and make sure we get those building blocks put in place to minimize any issues that might pop up in the future. So those are a few ways to connect with me, and I would really welcome just even having a chat. So if someone wants to learn more about what fractional human resource is and having that fractional HR partner would look like.
I think it's a really important point, and you probably exemplify it more than anyone else I know, that fractional does not mean transactional.
It's true.
And it could be a fractional configuration where you're there X amount of time, but you could be there over an extended period of time. And as someone, with Jillian, with that kind of longevity, and also I think with that particular mix of an economics background and this practicality, person that's got 12 years of journaling, that continuity is something that I think is under-recognized and undervalued, unfortunately, by a lot of boards, the value of that. So yes, it's like insurance, but insurance we keep in as a permanent fixture of it. And I think this is an example on the side of where that's really exceptional.
And I think, Carl, you also hit the nail on the head that organizations really thrive when they've built strong relationships with their people. And that's something so important to me, as is evident with the tenure I've spent when I worked with in corporate. I didn't jump around from one HR job to another. I made the pivots at very clear points in my personal life and career transitions. But I think relationship building with leadership teams, connecting with people, first of all, it's something I just love. I love learning about people. I like elevating people. I like connecting individuals with other individuals so they can make new connections and grow themselves, whether it be personally or professionally. So I am looking to really work with people for the long term, because I think those relationships are what carries an organization's well-being at the end of the day and makes people want to show up every day. And it's fun at the end of the day. You don't want to be, look, there are things at work that we all don't love, but you want to love working with the colleagues that you are working with. So that helps showing up every day.
Perfect. Jillian, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl. This has been so much fun, and I've really enjoyed our conversation.